This is the Puma Ultra 1.1, the brand new speed boot line from Puma. And it confuses me. What's up guys, James here from BootWizard Boot Reviews, and today we are going to be doing a full review of this brand new Puma Ultra, giving you all the information, the ins and outs, so you can work out if you should go out and buy this crazy light new speed boot from Puma. Now, the weight is one of the things that actually confuses me about this boot. It's clearly a speed boot, it's clearly got Evo Speed lineage, Evo Speed vibes, but there's so much of it just on feet and the feel that just doesn't scream speed boot to me. So we're going to work out if that's a good thing, a bad thing, or if I'm just getting old and getting confused. So let's jump into it. Remember to like the video, get subscribed to the channel, and let's see if these are genuinely very good or just confusing. So normally we'd start with all the tech and all the new things in the upper, but the weight is the big ticket item here. It's the thing Puma are really pushing. It's a really big USP for this boot. So let's get it on the scales. And my boots are coming in at 159 grams. Puma are advertising this at 160 grams as like the big, this is how light this boot is. And this is not disappointing. This is coming in around that weight. This is a UK 7.5. 159 grams, nothing to complain about there, compared to the original Evo Speed 1, which was 189, and that was a crazy lightweight boot at the time, and comparing it to basically the most popular speed boot on the market right now, that one coming in at 196 grams in the Vapor. So if you're looking for lightweight, that's all you really care about, there's your boot right there. You've got the information, you can stop watching. Don't stop watching. There's so much more about this boot. Let's dive into it. The upper, the tech, all of this new stuff that Puma have thrown at the Ultra. And my immediate thought when looking at the tech is that it's actually very similar, in an idea form at least, to the Vapor. So the Vapor is a woven knitted upper with two types of yarns woven together to provide you with all the stability that you need while maintaining that softness because of the two types of material. Puma have taken this idea or this concept and maybe gone a little bit further. So you get the base woven material, and then on top of that, woven into it, you get Kevlar and carbon. So that's aramid and carbon fibers, which are there to provide you with all the structure that you need. Altogether, this is the Matrix Evo upper, or that's what Puma are calling it. Basically, three different types of material woven together to provide you with the softness, and it is very soft out of the box, and stability for that lockdown and responsiveness that you need. There is, however, a big difference between the inners of the Ultra and the Vapor. The Vapor relies on a very thin, very basic liner. It's meant to be as stripped back as possible, whereas the Ultra has gone with that kind of idea with a fairly soft liner. It's quite thin, but there's definitely a layer of foam in there, and very prevalent and very noticeable in this toe box area. And what that does is it changes the whole feel of the boot and your whole touch on the ball. It's quite confusing. I'm probably going to use that word a lot, that to add such a thin layer has such a huge impact on the boot. So the Vapor feels very tight to your foot, aggressive and barefoot with the touch, whereas while the Ultra has a barefoot touch, there's definitely an element of padding to it and an element of relaxed comfort, especially through the toe box. Now, I'm not saying that this is a bad thing, but I also mentioned lockdown and responsiveness earlier. Now, the lockdown here is good, especially through the midfoot, these laces. The whole Matrix Evo upper does a really good job of giving you good lockdown, and the boot is definitely responsive, adequately so. I have no complaints there either. But it's not mind-blowing, although I will say the lockdown is good. And then the general shape of the upper added to that kind of padded sensation means that while this is light, and while that gives me all kinds of speed boot vibes along with some other elements of the boot, it just doesn't scream speed boot at me enough, or at least not what I was expecting. I wanted this to be a locked in, I wanted it to be like seatbelt locked down into a thin barefoot boot that was going to give me an aggressive feel. And it's just not what I've got. I feel like I've got a very lightweight boot with a fairly barefoot touch on the ball, but with padding and a bit of extra room. It's not bad. It's just not what I was expecting from this speed boot. And this is the key. It's a return to a speed boot. And I don't really think that they've quite nailed exactly that. What you could say is that this is probably going down the route of maybe an Adidas X 19.1, not in the way it feels or performs, but in the way that the 19.1 was a speed boot that was very accessible to a lot of people because of the fit, because it wasn't crazy barefoot like the Vapor. So it's leaning in that direction, a speed boot for all people. But just the way that it's been marketed, this move to an 160 gram boot, I just think I wanted it to be a bit more crazy and honestly be a bit more Puma, because I feel like that's what Puma do really well. They do out of the box and they do Puma's own thing and they do it really well. And this feels like they got halfway there. They were like, we're gonna make a crazy lightweight boot. We're gonna go back to Evo Power, Evo Speed, SL ideas. And then they kind of went, but we really need to sell this to as many people as possible. So reined it all back in, even though they've got some really great tech, especially in the upper, which I think they can do some great things with down the line. And again, knowing Puma, this will last about 6 months before we get an Ultra 1.2. Something that Puma introduced on their uppers with the Future 5.1 is GCP, or the Grip Control Pro, which you can see here. Now what this is it's a coating that runs around an area of the boot which is designed to give you better grip and control on the ball. Now, this is also very confusing because this makes absolutely no sense on the Ultra. It made a little bit of sense on the Future. So it's this area that you can see here, this area that covers up most of the toe box of the boot, some of the instep here on the Future, and also some of the outstep. That is the Grip Control Pro element. They've used the same technology, or at least the same name, on the Ultra, but it literally covers about a thumb's width around the front of the boot here and up into the instep slightly higher. You just don't make contact with the ball here. This has become a toe punt grip element. If you fancy toe punting the ball a lot and you want a bit of extra grip, you can do it with this. Like, the texture is grippy and I think it would be nice on the boot, but this Grip Control Pro element is essentially pointless. They essentially need to come out and say it's for durability, because that's what I feel like it's for, or just not have Grip Control Pro on it, because that is not doing anything for your touch and feel on the ball. All of the texture comes from the upper. So this is also very important. The upper on this is completely uncoated. Again, in a very similar way to what they've done with the upper on the Future 5.1. All of this is just exposed Evo knit, and this is all exposed Matrix Evo. All this, and then this central lacing portion here, which is a stretchy version of Evo knit. It's pretty good actually. It's very easy to get your foot in these, surprisingly so. but all of this is your touch and feel on the ball. And it's sandpapery. It's not got a grippy, sticky coating or anything like you might have found on the new GT, but it certainly offers an extra touch and feel benefit on the ball because of all of these fibers moving together, being woven together, and providing a very sandpapery, dry texture. The closest thing that I can describe it to is the texture that you get on the Nemesis 19.1, which is all of the medical strips, which then have a more sandpaper-like texture. It's like that, but more extreme. As is standard with pretty much most top-end boots at the moment, you get a one-piece knitted upper. However, instead of getting the dual lace hole setup that you're pretty much used to on a one-piece upper boot, you get this lace hole setup, which is some of the fibers from the upper have been almost looks like they're pulled out, woven into place, and created lace loops that sit on the top of the boot, and that's what holds the laces. Now, this is okay. I was worried when I first saw this that potentially it would do something similar to what the Future 18.1 did and lead you with a bit of a disconnect between the laces and where it applies the lockdown and how it applies that lockdown through the boot. But that doesn't seem to be a problem. My issue isn't something I've experienced yet. It's the fact that I think these are going to be pretty poor in durability terms. These, I'm very worried about them breaking. If you, I don't know, pull on them too tight or they wear over time, I can imagine these kind of pinging off and breaking. So can't confirm it's the case. Can't confirm that's definitely going to happen, but maybe something to be wary of. And then when you combine that with an upper that's completely exposed, if you're using this in really adverse weather or something like that, I can't imagine that this is going to be very easy to keep clean. And if you can't keep it clean, you can't keep it dry, that frequently will affect the durability you get out of a boot as well. So mine have been fine so far. I've had them out in some wet. It's not a big deal, but something that I think you should be aware of. So to give you an upper overview so that you're not confused and you know exactly what's going on here, even though the boot is pretty confusing, I think you've got a Matrix Evo upper made up of 3 woven yarns, gives you good lockdown, good responsiveness. However, it is completely exposed, which may affect the durability along with these lace loops. The feel and touch on the ball does have a slightly barefoot feel because of the thin upper. However, there's padding, especially through this toe box area, which leads it to have a slightly more padded feel than you would expect. And combine that with the volume and overall fit of the boot, having something at 160 grams with that volume and extra padding really is a bit of a juxtaposition between how you would expect this boot to feel and how you would maybe want it to feel as a super locked in, super responsive, super barefoot speed boot. However, with that said, we will get onto fit and comfort in a while, and taking into account all of those elements along with the fit and comfort, you might find that this becomes a speed boot that appeals to a mass amount of people instead of maybe a smaller, more niche speed boot nerd market. So flipping the boot around onto the area of the boot that I think makes complete sense on the surface, this brand new Soleplate from Puma. It's fantastic. It's really good, and they've done the right thing by moving to a more aggressive Soleplate and stud pattern for this particular boot because it's a speed boot and that's what we want. So you get these 5 chevron bladed studs in the front, nice and aggressive, give you good purchase in the ground. And I do particularly like these 2, which seem to have been pushed that little bit further forward. And this whole black area here gives you a really good bend, but great snapback at the same time. This is a really nice setup in terms of flexibility and rigidity to give you that feeling of being able to push off quickly and have enough support for good lateral movements and to give you good lockdown, good responsiveness, in this area of the boot. Great stuff. Further down the boot, you've got these two studs here, which is kind of support studs, and then the 4 in the heel, and all of these remind me a little of the stud shape that you would get on the Messi Gamba Tracks outsole, and that's no bad thing because I like that outsole a lot. I like the stud shape there, and I think those are in a similar vein, and these do a great job. And again, similar to what you get from the GT at the moment, it does have more of an erring towards giving you good multi-directional movement as well as straight line, unlike something like the Vapor, which is designed purely around straight line speed. Overall, absolutely solid, not confusing, really good. Or is it a bit confusing? Yes, it's a bit confusing because this, according to Puma, is an FG-AG plate. They even went so far as to put it on the boot. It says FG-AG on the sole plate. And have you ever seen a really good, really safe AG pattern with so many studs that are bladed and chevrons? This is like, the studs aren't super long, that's not a problem. They are long-ish without being crazy, but this is too aggressive for an AG pitch, in my opinion. There's too much traction, it's potentially dangerous, and I just don't recommend it. I think that if you want a boot for an AG pitch, this one isn't it. And then when you combine the fact that it's an FG-AG outsole, which I absolutely don't agree with the fact that I'm already slightly concerned about the exposed nature of this upper and these lace loops, maybe it's a durability issue as well. Bottom line, great outsole, phenomenal for firm natural grass, great improvement from Puma, I like it, but BootWizard does not recommend it for AG, despite the fact that the people who made this actually do. Value for money, and that means time to shine for the Puma Ultra, because this is a 160 gram speed boot with high-end technology. It's a top-end boot, and it's going to cost you £180, 200 euros, or $200, which is significantly less than you're going to pay for something like a Vapor, a Phantom GT, an Adidas X, either whether you're picking up a 19 or a Ghosted. If you want a good value for money option with a top-end speed boot from one of the big three brands, this is really, really solid. I love the fact that Puma have gone through all this innovation and they've kept their boots at an affordable price point. I'm really impressed with the fact that Puma have done this. I'm impressed with the quality for the price, and whether I have issues with the boot one way or the other, if you're getting a top-end speed boot for 200 euros, dollars, or 180 pounds, you're pretty much getting good value for money in today's market. Now, it's not the cheapest thing on earth, of course. It's still an expensive football boot because 200 euros is a lot of money. But when you take it at the current market prices, I've got to applaud Puma for keeping it at a reasonable price. They're cheaper than the New Balance boots as well. And yeah, overall, I'm a fan of the price, and I've got a it's a little round of applause. Round of applause for Puma there. Best value, top end speed boot that you can pretty much buy from one of the big three at the moment. Nice work. On to the fit and comfort, and back to the slightly confusing screwy stuff, but we'll start with the easy bit, size. I bought these in a UK 7.5, which is technically half a size down from what I would normally purchase, even though I fluctuate between a 7.5 and an 8, depending on the boot and the brand. I usually pick up a 7.5 in the future. That's where I go with that. It's very comfortable, and that's absolutely what I recommended for the future. Go down half a size. It's also what I would recommend with the Ultra. If you have a future, buy the same size. Still referencing the future, it's a boot that I've recommended on many occasions to people who are like, I want a boot that will fit my wide feet. This is a go-to for me if you want a new boot that fits wider feet. It's absolutely something you should check out. And then back to that kind of confusing, I don't really know where Puma are going with this idea. This will pretty much do the same. It's not stupid wide. It's not as wide as the Future is, for sure. But as far as a speed boot goes, this is actually a much wider than I was expecting it to be, which I have kind of an average width foot, and I did want it to be that little bit tighter. The midfoot isn't so bad, but the toe box has a lot of room in there. Like if I put these on, I can kind of pinch a little bit of excess material, which is kind of a volume issue more than anything else. It just doesn't sit quite as low and quite on as much onto my foot as I would want. Now that's not necessarily a bad thing about the boot. It's just that because it's a speed boot and because that's how it's marketed and because that's what I'm expecting and because it's 160 grams, I wanted a boot that was going to kind of like sit on my foot a little bit more, something I was going to be strapped into a little bit more, something more like I get from the Vapor and something that it looks like we're going to get from the X20 Ghosted line. X-Ghosted line, there's no 20 anymore. To conclude, I think what Puma have tried to do here is something very similar to what they did way back when they released the Evo Speed SL lines. Then everybody was focused on getting the lightest possible boot, and Puma tried to jump themselves right to the front of the line by creating the Evo Speed SL, a boot barely over 100 grams, and something to get everybody talking and say, we are the best, we make the lightest boots. Over current times, over the last couple of years, boots have been getting lighter and lighter again, and consumer demand has been for a lighter boot. I think with the Ultra, Puma have decided to jump themselves back to the front of that queue again and say confidently, we make speed boots and we make the lightest speed boots on the market, so you should buy our products. However, in doing that, I think they've also realized that maybe some of their mistakes from the SL, a boot that was absolutely not durable, a boot that people weren't going to go out and buy, a boot that was too expensive, and a boot that generally didn't appeal to the masses, they've tried to make a boot that is going to fit and appeal to many, many people by not giving that crazy barefoot touch, that low volume fit that you would expect from a speed boot. But I think in doing that, they've kind of handicapped their own boot, and what they could have had was a really impressive top-end extreme speed boot with a barefoot touch and a lower volume and a tighter sensation, and something that would have really given maybe the Vapor a run for its money. Whereas in my opinion, what we've got is a good boot that's very light, but the lightness for me leads to a bit of a disconnect between how the boot feels weight-wise on your feet and the actual touch and performance that you get. So I hope that's absolutely clear as mud for everybody. Let me know what you think of the Puma Ultra. I'd love to know what you think. If you've managed to pick up a pair already, drop that info down in the comments. If you do want to pick up a pair, then the top comment or in the description will have a link to the place that I think is the best to pick these up from. But that's all from me here at BootWizard today. Remember to like the video, get subscribed for more awesome stuff on the way, including a giveaway for one of these. Shh. Coming very, very soon. Well, that's all from me. Have a good one, and I'll see you very soon.